Here we go, February 9th. Tuesday, and a lot of information. Haven't been on here for a few days. Snowstorm here back in the east, dumped some snow, chance to chill. Super Bowl Sunday, so figured let's wait and see what's out there. It's kind of interesting, but the Chronicle for Higher Education, and if you're a frequent listener to this, you know that the Chronicle is like the Bible for higher education. And their number one issue is for, you can see that, the crisis year. If you're listening to this, it's the front page, the crisis year on top of the Chronicle of Higher Education. That was the first one. The second one, which I'll finish with, will be even more apropos. What's the big news? I must have printed out 8 to 9 pages of information on the NIL case. Title IX, which is a big deal, but this is going to supersede that in terms of anything with sports, and it has an effect on it because Title IX could be impacted because it's going to draw money away, or that money is going to go to those male and female athletes where the money goes, which is basketball and football, and they pay for some of the other sports. All right, so there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to get through this as fast as possible. I don't want to carry this too long. Funny, but the Sports Business Journal had a big article, legal experts weigh in on NCAA Supreme Court case. That was pretty intriguing. I didn't get a chance to read all that, but I read everything else. So let's get right down to the major parts going on. The NCAA Division III Administrative Council has approved a recommendation to cancel all winter championships. Some people are still finishing out. Some people are doing some stuff. Others aren't. But you can tell there's a lot out there. The reason NIL and all this is coming, the NCAA made their filing to the Supreme Court, and they also have submission from the conferences, and they held the amicus, which is other. I think it was 10 other agencies or groups said that they're going to kick in with a belief that this is going to destroy the way collegiate athletics looks. It's the American Council on Education, AEC, and 10 other higher ed associations, blah, 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 filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court in its Alston case, basically saying, here's our reason why we agree with them. Basically, they say their universities are not commercial profit-seeking entities. I know, they just need profit-making there's not-for-profit and a non-profit. It's not a zero-sum game because they spend all the money they get and they're always asking people for more money. So the reason they're trying to say no, no, no is because they know it's going to affect them, and then it's going to come back to why are people going to college, etc., which is going to be something I'll show you guys at the end from also the Chronicle Higher Education. But that's typical, and I thought I'd start off with that. The NCAA, USA Today ran something. NCAA says it's entitled to particular deference in its rules, in its rulemaking, because it is not primarily a commercial venture. But they do run commercial ventures to support their status. Okay, here's the rest of that article. Not primarily a commercial venture, but rather an association, the core mission of which is to facilitate intercollegiate sports as an important component of the educational opportunities schools offer. I won't go into it. You all know the drill. Okay, Senator Murphy from Connecticut, a big deal. Him and Cory Booker, they're the two big wigs who are passing a lot of legislation. If you notice that over the last, I say 5-6 days, about 4 or 5 other states jumped in and they've added the July 1 of this year, the NIL rights for student athletes, and it's kind of crazy. And right now, the big issue is some people are saying the athletes have a right, and the NCAA is trying to hold it back as much as possible. If you notice, we don't hear that marketplace anymore, NCAA marketplace. Then you hear all these companies getting in and making deals with universities, trying to offset that again. And it's gone, these Democratic senators they want blood, they want justice. And if there's any social justice I'll jump on board with, it's that one, because that is deserved. And like I said, if you don't believe me, Washington Post article on how black athletes have funded a lot of the institutions and basically their megalithic athletic structures. Senator Murphy says the NCAA says that no matter what, athletes are not and can never be considered employees, but they are employees. They provide a valuable service. They receive compensation in the form of scholarships, and you lose that compensation if they refuse to do the job. Okay, that was one piece. Let's see. Boise State professor and attorney Eric Ehrlich filed a emeritus stage amicus on behalf of neither party. He says, I argue that even if the court rules in favor of the NCAA, it should not do so in a way that gives any sort of antitrust immunity to the NCAA. Such a decision would be left in the hands of Congress, given the lack of stare decisis already prescribing such an exemption. I'm not that good of a legal, even though I sometimes I'm not that good. But then again, it's not going to be hard to get into that. How about this one? Athlon Sports. Several college presidents and key NCAA leaders are set to meet, lobby with Congress virtually the last weekend in February to engage on NIL, etc. Yes, that's why if we're going to get rulings from the NCAA, I doubt if they're going to do that, the athletic directors and people are going to do that while they're lobbying Congress. I think it's kind of ludicrous to think that they're going to try to go do that at the same time. So I thought that was kind of crazy. Rutgers basketball player went on Instagram and, talking about how hard the bubble's been, et cetera, and how people are breaking up with their families. And he called it modern day slavery. And this one, you realize we are playing a pandemic, being told to stay away from everybody we love just for you all entertainment. But I can't sell my own jersey with my last name on it to help my future financially. That makes sense to you? ? He's right on. I can't blame him. Okay, the NCAA, the U.S. Supreme Court, will hear the arguments on the Alston case on March 31st. The conferences all sent their stuff. The NCAA sent their stuff to the Supreme Court. They figured they should have all the latitude to do all this, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be kind of intriguing. There's a couple pieces I wanted to go in here. Here you go. NCAA files it. The crux of their argument is that the NCAA, not federal judges, should get to define the line that separates collegiate amateurs from pro athletes, per ESPN's Dan Murphy. Murphy reported, while this case doesn't deal specifically with NIL rules, SCOTUS could rule broadly enough to set some important and relevant precedent about what kind of deference federal courts should show an eye on NCAA to make its own rules. I mean, they basically threaten to sue everybody who does bother with them. And unless you get a big law firm and a big case like Hausfeld, nobody's taking your case. Nobody's taking a small case. These big law firms want the home run case. The EA Sports, and this is it was a big home run case. In fact, EA dropped all their college football games, but now they're bringing them back. Why? Because they know the dam's about to break and they're going to do something. And they figured, hey, for now, the rosters will not include the NIL of real student athletes, but Holt is the VP GM for EA, and he says, but Holt notes that if and when NIL changes occur, EA will be ready. Yeah, they're going to use the statistics of the athletes given to them by the universities, paycheck, but they're not going to use the names. It got so bad that they used the images. That's how they got caught. Like I said, and one of the people from Hausfeld said, you could look at this the beginning of the unraveling. I've been waiting for this ever since the O'Bannon case. We had talked to EA about doing workarounds. They finally decided to do it. What gets in this work about? Blah blah blah. EA is positioning itself to incorporate players soon. They're taking the data now. They'll put the names on later. And where are they getting the data? The universities. And don't think the student athletes are going to get charged for the data. Remember, you walk in a restaurant and you want to buy dinner? They give you your knife and your fork, and that's it. Oh, you want a napkin? Pay for that. Salt and pepper? You add that on the bill too. I'm trying to remember. It's like getting a sandwich. All the condiments cost. So, Senator Murphy, here's another comment. Calls the deal further proof that the NCAA's priority is keeping their profits coming while keeping any and all revenue away from their athletes. Cutting athletes out of this reboot so they aren't responsible for paying them for their likeness is a grave injustice. Bravo. Donald Remy. Today we asked the this is the NCAA's person, Chief Legal Officer. Today we asked the U.S. Supreme Court to reaffirm that the NCAA has ample latitude to govern collegiate sports. Well, as outlawed in our brief, the lower court rulings distorts federal antitrust law and in the process wrongly redefines amateurism and undermines the NCAA's supervision of collegiate athletics. So if it's collegiate athletics, how they overseeing non-collegiate summer basketball? So they're telling us that you have to pay, event operators have to pay, you have to register, you have to do all these things. But anybody ask why the clearinghouse is going on and why our student athletes applying for an NCAA school have to pay just to register? And there's a whole other story. There's too much here. But just remember all that. It said the NCAA and its member schools are committed to defending the rules that govern collegiate sports, the same rules that create an environment where hundreds of thousands of student athletes can receive the lifelong benefits of a college education. But if you don't maintain a grade, you're kicked out. Oh, but if you're an athlete, we'll give you some bogus courses so we can slide you through, get you through college, use your talents, and then bounce you out at the end. Oh, wait a minute. Now they're going to come back and say, we're going to make sure you get through college? Oh, wait a minute. So what about, making sure I got tutors and all that? Or making sure that there's a progression. Hey, somebody's going to have to figure this out. But like I said, this is the best one. CBS Dodd breaks down the Alston case after both sides filed their briefs. After speaking with several legal experts, Dodd notes that the NCAA sees a chance to put a stake in the ground, at least slowing the flow of lawsuits against its amateurism model that have drained time and resources. Hey, they should have paid me out years ago, and they wouldn't have had this case because the Sherman Antitrust would have never been on the table. But it got on the table because all those assistant coaches who were paid grad assistant set salaries, and you all know who I'm talking about, some of you older coaches. I mean, you remember those days, maybe 15, 20 years ago? 93. My God, 30. Hey, guess what? They all got paid because the NCAA fought it for at least a decade, but they eventually got paid out. And that's why everybody went down that Sherman Antitrust route. And everybody seems to ignore how that occurred. But that's okay. Blue Star Productions, Inc. versus NCAA 1993. And there's too much to talk about that too, but we're moving on. The Supreme Court could they're going to try to shut down the Ninth Circuit Court judge. I don't think that's happening. U.S. Senator Murphy is introducing NIL legislation, says his office allows student athletes to earn money off their NIL with the fewest restrictions possible. The College Athlete Economic Freedom Act, sponsored by Murphy and U.S. Congresswoman Trahan, Democrat of Massachusetts would prohibit the NCAA and its members from restricting NIL opportunities for student athletes, prospective student athletes. And that's the first one who mentioned prospective student athletes. That means high school student athletes can't be told by the NCAA, oh, no, we're going to have to rule on you before you get to college. Because what if an AZ Fudd wants to run a business, or a Jada Williams or a Mikey Williams? Hey, you know what? Everybody wants to do their NIL now, and everybody's worried about, well, the NCAA is telling me no. This says it right here. He's trying to make that illegal too. The athletics, Jenks examines the roots of amateurism, and this is this is like when Jim Thorpe didn't get his medals, and the AAU is right now actively pursuing to get his medals, his records, and everything back because of this. If you ever watched the Burt Lancaster Jim Thorpe movie, it's a very stirring and classic movie. It's worth digging up on one of the channels and Turner Classic Movies and watching it. But this is what she wrote. You have to remember, this was 1866, the London Amateur Athletic Club. Okay? By definition, Jenks observes, only the, quote, the rich could afford to be amateurs and thus compete, given that professional sports had yet to come into existence in anything resembling its current form. Hello? I mean, they were holding on to this forever, into the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I mean, that's a story unto itself. And if you want to look, go find out the guy who ran the USOC like a iron fist all those years. And it was part of that whole system of AAU before the people who run AAU in the 80s and 90s. Because you have to remember the Sports Act of 76 basically split off the AAU and its domination of sports. And that's when the colleges were fighting for the players and the athletes and the AAU. Where do you play? So it went to Congress, and the AAU lost because the colleges and football won. It was big, and they basically had all the money. As you can see, they're trying to hold on to it right now, just like these people did with the AAU back in the day. All right, I guess that's a lot of the stuff that's out there on the NIL. I went through this real fast. Let's see, the Big West and the MAC have endorsed the Knight Commission's proposal to overhaul the NCAA. In a letter to President Emmer, the Big West indicated it quote, sees the need for transformative, not incremental changes in the NCAA organizational structure and revenue distribution. In its own missive, the MAC presidents agree that bold change is needed in the current fragmented governance of Division I athletics. I mean, if you couldn't see this coming, it just couldn't sustain. And the snowball effect of all the protests this summer has made it you can't roll it back. And you just need to throw the word privilege around. That'll scare a lot of people, and go from there. But then again, this leads right into another interesting piece, which is I'll make sure I get all this out of here. Yeah. Okay. This was the big one. Overtime. The site basically it said overtime to launch semi-professional league for high school basketball prospects. Overtime, a multimedia sports company, is planning to launch a semi-professional basketball league that will provide compensation for high school basketball prospects, multiple sources told 24/7 Sports. I was also told that it was leaked and they didn't want it out, but it got out. The expectation is that Overtime will announce the league this month with the goal to begin competition September 2021. Wow, that's pretty fast. It's not hard to find out who the top players are. The aim of the league is to field up to 8 teams of the top high school basketball prospects in the country, with the vision of providing a new preps to pro alternative with salaries expected to be well within the 6-figure range per sources. Upon graduating, the next step for these prospects will likely be for the G League or overseas opportunities. And this is the best one. It's currently unclear how this will impact college eligibility, but the prevalence of club basketball teams competing during the high school basketball season due to COVID restriction has created an interest in this type of environment. hey, everybody knew this was a big deal when anybody who was in at the Sovereign Bank Arena up the road here in Trenton saw Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James go at it in high school. The place was packed. All the shoe executives were in the building. Everybody was there. It was a who's who. Yeah, I was there. And it was a great night of basketball. Why? Because this is what people hated some entrepreneurs from putting these high school games going on around the country. And that became ugly because then people wanted bigger cuts, who's controlling the video, and it just got to be a mess. And then big money came in. Well, if you read my article on the Junior NBA from 2019, at the end of the story, I talked about how how long is it going to take for the NBA to create its own high school D League or a G League, whatever you want to call it, because what's the purpose of doing the Junior NBA at 14 to basically tag all the players and basically watch them at 15, which is really the age you probably end up playing at, and you got 2 years to figure out if you can play. And why wait for BWB, Basketball Without Borders camps, which run all over the country, all over the world, but didn't run this past year. And if they did, it was very quiet. But those are being the big incubators for NBA and Pro Town and people to see who the up and coming people are. And if they're going to do that on a global scale, that's like 17, 18, 19, I guess 17, 18. And the U19s is the biggest place for professional European, African, South American. If you're going to be a pro and you're young, you're going to be there. The Greek Freak, Giannis, he was there. And I mean, Dick Weiss was in, he was in Crete or Cyprus. And he came back and he said, this guy almost single-handedly beat the USA team. And so everybody knew who he was. And if you're really betting on who's going to get drafted, it's usually out of the U19s in Europe. Well, what they're doing is they're saying, we need to track these guys earlier. And I could talk about some other things like the Euro League. They had the Junior League, who was sponsoring that, who was doing what, who was running what events, and that's all been pared back. But I mean, they're going to have to do something here because high school basketball is horrible. Less and less great players are coming through the ranks. Sure, there's a top of the pyramid, but the pyramid is shrinking at the bottom, not at the top. And guess what? I mean, if there's 24, 36 good players in America, you've got a chance to be maybe 12, get a pro, and maybe the next 24 get something else. But if they're talking 70, there's going to have to be a deal to get these kids to go back to college and to be able to allow them to play if they get to graduation class year to go to college, provided they have the grades. I think that has to be said. You have to basically have a fallback plan. And if they're not doing that, then they're really using the kids, which goes back to what some of the great thinkers and the great coaches in the sport talked about, how this is about getting these kids an education and preparing them for life, because not everybody's a pro. Well, they're taking advantage of them if they're not giving them an education. So let's see how they're going to do that. Overtime's got a very audacious plan, and let's see how the NBA and Nike respond to that, because if anybody's going to do anything, it'll be those two companies. And I do say companies because they do work hand in hand a lot. But then again, listen to my prior broadcast, you'll figure out and connect all the dots. Is there anything wrong with that? Not at all. It's just that people are trying to hold on to the past. Good luck. That's not easy. It's starting to, things are changing. Go look at a newspaper today on a newsstand. Look how thin it is. Who would have thought? Couple more things and we'll get to finish up here. ESPN is trying to sell X Games as part of a broader review of ESPN's assets. There was even talk about ESPN selling itself. What does that tell you? Why? Because everybody's going to this ESPN Plus. Everything's a Disney Plus. Everything's a plus. Within 5 years, everybody's going to be claiming, why can't I get cable TV back? I'll pay the $60 a month. Now you're going to end up paying $60 for 4 sites. And guess what? And some of them are going to be worth it because I got Disney Plus for The Mandalorian. It was worth it. But again, I mean, how many services can you take? And it's going to get nuts. But ESPN, they're selling X Games. What, they're going to have an X Games channel? Is that going on the Discovery Plus channel now? That was a crazy one. As for the NCAA women's tournament, it's going to be in San Antonio, which we expected, 64 teams, which we expect. Let's see if they get to 64, but they'll take 64, but that's going to cost a lot of money because a lot of testing and a lot of kids. And you have to remember, there are a lot of teams back in the day who would make it end their season. They would have a chance for the NIT, WNIT, there's another, about 2 other different events that were going on. Well, guess what? Some of the schools said, no, we're not playing. We're voting not to play. And everybody's like, why? Because it's summer vacation. They get their break, summer break. They get off for Easter. They get to go away and they're with their friends from college. And they're like, yo, we're out of here. Why should I play? Why should I hang around another week and be miserable? Especially during COVID. And a lot of colleges, don't want all these tournaments. They just want to get, hey, let's pick the top teams. We'll go to the tournament. It prevents us from having to sit through another 12 to 14 days of lockdown, including testing, constant. Why? You have to pay the bills. The NCAA TV contract. They're making the kids do this. Oh, that's right. We're not allowed to get paid. Let's see. There was a couple other items here. The NBA and the NBA Players Association progressing toward an agreement for an all-star game March 7th at State Farm Arena in Atlanta. EA Games and all this other stuff. They got their video stuff. LeBron James has settled photographers' lawsuit after an order to show at a hearing. He settled for $1 million. He didn't want to show up. Photographer Stephen Mitchell, he was used his picture for a post. He didn't get authorization for it, so he fought that. Obviously, the terms of the settlement were never disclosed. And couple more FBS programs signed more than 400 fewer recruits in 2021 than the previous 2 years. This goes back to my last episode when I talked about the impact of COVID on the class of 21 and 22. And this is critical because this is the football programs doing this. Basketball will come next. FBS signed 400 fewer recruits and several contributing factors. Some Power 5 programs used a third of their scholarships in the transfer portal, and some Group of 5 programs will end up using most or all of theirs via the portal. Wow. And they're not expanding their rosters, and they're going to try to ask about can they get a waiver on that. In the short term, Elliott expects those numbers to even out, but suggests a long-term scholarship crunch may be in store for the classes of 22 and 23. This just came out. You heard it on the podcast. Heard me talk about this back months ago. And it's sad, but it's going to happen. So that's why there's going to be a new norm, and hopefully maybe this week I'll do another podcast on college coaches, how they look at a roster, how you look at talent. They're complaining about, I got to go out and see somebody. Well, no, they don't. But then again, there's alternatives. But then again, we can't go back to the old ways because the old ways are broke. And how can you do anything on the last minute? Like, snap your finger, create a 10-course dinner. Not happening. People are going to be in trouble this summer because of contracts or spaces that they have. It's crazy. And I'll get to a bunch of other articles after this one. In order to decrease its reliance on advertising, Twitter is considering a subscription model for services such as TweetDeck and advanced features like undo send, profile customization, and ad-free feeds. So far, all plans are only preliminary. They're going to go to a paid circuit. Why? Because they want to cut the riffraff out. What this means is that there's going to be something else going on, or why there's no newspapers. I think I just read that a West Virginia newspaper is suing Google for their loss of revenue. It's about time. As I mentioned before, I think in this, maybe back in a podcast, eventually you're going to need an iTunes card for any type of news, because Google's going to get shut out of all these sites. The Athlete, the Undefeated, ESPN, they're all going to basically charge you because information, somebody's got to do it. And everybody who's doing social wants to get paid after a while. Even if it's free, oh yeah, well, I want to do it. I want to get paid. Now the people are going to end up hiring people back to do some of this. But are people willing to pay? That's the problem. Are people willing to pay and read? Maybe COVID has made people read more. But you have to remember, the generational sports is changing. The people who donate to colleges, go to these events, buy those big boxes, corporate everything, this and that. They have decisions to make when it comes to football, pro football, and basketball. But then they're also going to have that next stage of college. Now, they may be more loyal to the college side, but eventually they're going to die out. And trust me, their kids ain't going to be saying, oh, yeah, let's will everything to them. Oh, no, that ain't happening. So, and there's been discussions of that already. I think I mentioned it in one of my other podcasts about the colleges are afraid to death of how the declining gift giving is going on. Obviously, people are still paying for a lot of this COVID stuff, but some of the big schools are getting that. I'm going to finish up with some Sports Business Journal articles I saw, which are always interesting. SBJ had a big article, a 2-pager on the Ivy League, and they had a sports timeline, how unreasonably careful. And people were angry about how the Ivy League shut everything down. And now that COVID's starting to come undone, they're all like, oh, well, maybe they jumped the gun. I'm just letting you know. Sports Illustrated adds metered paywall in bid to boost revenues. We just talked about this at Twitter and everybody else. Sports Illustrated, they're now coming back and they're going to create a paywall. And that is going to happen. Crazy. And everybody's looking for money. But guess what? Cannabis and gambling turning the corner as viable assets. Article in the boardroom in Sports Business Journal. I got MJ on the top. Guess what? They're going crazy for gambling. Cannabis, not yet. Gambling, oh yeah, look to see that on uniforms probably by the end of the summer or the season. They're ready to do that. Hoop portraits to debut G League documentary. This is an article talking about guys who could possibly go to the G League. They're going to run a story. G League's Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook accounts. The NBA's Twitch platform. Yeah, they're going to talk about guys who, again, part of that whole Overwatch, overtime, NBA, Junior, D League. It's coming. They just have to figure out the economics, and they'll be done after that. NBA legend Garnett to host esports makeover show. Kevin Garnett with esports makeover show. That's brilliant. Why? 3 things. 1, it's esports. Number 2, you got an NBA retired player delving around esports, and he's going where the money is, and obviously that's where a lot of people are. And I never forget watching Kevin Garnett play in high school in Chicago with Steve Tucker. It was a great game. I'll never forget. As soon as I saw him, I was like, oh my God. He palmed the ball at the high key, the top of the elbow. And the next person I saw do that that impressed me was Breanna Stewart. And as soon as I saw her do that as a freshman, I was like, oh my God. And that became history. So, yeah, Kevin Garnett. Women in sports defy imposter syndrome with fast thinking. I never heard of this, but it's seems to be a big deal now. Women are getting pasted with an imposter syndrome. Everybody needs to be informed and educated. this was a good one because after I read this, I saw a couple other articles about it, and I was like, wow, imposter syndrome. We won't see that in basketball because the people who are playing basketball are pretty tough. And lastly, how to survive the enrollment bust. This is the thickest chronicle of higher education that I've seen in a while. And this is chock full of information, and everybody's talking focus, careers, and a lot of ads for people for jobs. Colleges in peril can be rescued, but only if their governing boards transform. Most trustees can't deal with a crisis. The failures of the past 10 years are in large part leadership failures of boards of trustees. Yeah, you know why? They all wanted to be on there so they can get football tickets. Okay. Another one, colleges share blame for assault on democracy. Higher education responded with silence? Huh, I doubt that. They were part of the people who stirred the pot. Where 5 presidents' cabinets went to college. Oh, that's intriguing. Wow. That's an interesting page. Everybody should get a look at that. This is kind of intriguing. Obama, 37 cabinet members, a ton of them with law degrees, and almost more, like 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20, 28 from Ivy League institutions. The most of anybody. Wow, there you go. And everybody on Trump's group had a law degree, all 30. And impressive. A lot of Trump's people went to public institutions. And this is very telling. Interesting. And he had the least Ivy League people. Well, Biden hasn't finished yet. Interesting. Okay, there's some intriguing stuff in this. Teaching in the age of disinformation, propaganda and conspiracy theories are everywhere. What's a professor to do? Do whatever it takes to keep your job. And if that means supporting one narrative or the other, you're going to do it. You're a slave to your job. So, there you go. That's it. I want to thank everybody. This is been a little bit longer than normal, but shorter than those 1 hour marathons I used to do. Trying to keep these shorter so people can listen to them and also get a chance to watch them if you go to YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go down, subscribe, and make sure you share it and hit the bell, and it'll tell you when it's being notified when I put another one up. And Apple and Spotify, I'm going to work on getting all those up because I have to pull all those Periscope YouTube or Periscope videos off, split the audio, etc., and get that rolling. That's going to probably take a while, but there'll at least be something when people want to really go back and listen to say, did he really say that? And yeah, it's there. So thank you, and have a good week, and congratulations to Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. Just unbelievable. Who would have thought? And I have to give the best commercial for the entire Super Bowl era, period, was a Verizon ad with Brady and Gronk. I thought that was precious. And Verizon did a good job with that. And especially with them winning, bravo. Okay, talk to everybody. And let's see. Nothing. People are starting to play. Teams are starting to try to figure out their schedules, figure out their rosters. Some schools aren't even playing, like in New York City. You can't play in the city of Philadelphia. Down south, people are getting ready for playoffs. People are out in gyms. You can play with some in gyms, some without. It's just a mess. And travel ball is not going to be any better because it's going to be everybody's going to have to wear a mask. And I don't think we're going to hear anything till probably, they're going to have to wait till March. Everybody wants to wait till February, but If they jumped the gun in February, God bless them. But I think it's going to be probably around March 15 when everybody's going to be able to make a decision on that June, July, or basically that July period. And they're not going to want to have to take anything back once they put it out there. So I would tell you everybody's going to be cautious because the rollout in vaccines has not been smooth for everybody. It's been a mess. I'm still waiting for mine, where other people have gotten theirs already. God bless them. I'm happy. And make sure everybody stays safe and takes care of themselves. All right. Thank you.